Welcome to JeremyStudios. Enjoy our stories. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Deep within an unmarked U.S. military black site, its location so classified not even high-ranking officials had access. Surveillance drones circled endlessly, snipers watched from hidden towers, fighter jets idled on standby, and massive motherships hovered silently above. This fortress of secrecy housed one of the most covert strike units in American history, Delta Force. Search and destroy. 10 men. Hardened warriors, forged in years of firefight and bloodshed. Each trained under the same elite doctrine: eliminate targets, vanish without trace, and leave no one standing. Unlike any conventional military unit, Delta Force operated in total anonymity. Their missions were so classified that even senior Pentagon officials didn't know they existed. Only the President via the Secretary of State received their reports. Every dossier, every identity, was locked down tighter than Fort Knox. On a storm-laced evening, the base commander, Marshal Richard Blemming, summoned the team for an urgent briefing. Intelligence had surfaced: a U.S. operative embedded in Russia had been captured during a transmission of highly sensitive data. This agent held a drive, one containing details about secret Russian lab experiments. If extracted by enemy hands, it could spark an international catastrophe. At precisely 5 a.m. on a Sunday morning, the Delta Force boarded a military-grade Boeing aircraft and ascended into the dark skies en route to Russian airspace. The mission, veiled even from top military brass, had only one objective: extraction at all costs. From 30,000 feet above sea level, the 10-man unit skydived into enemy territory, oxygen masks on, gear intact, weapons hot. They landed offshore and rendezvoused with a discreet Russian contact who helped them stash their combat gear, got in civilian outfits, and blend into the city. James Gallagher, Alpha team leader, split the group into two: one tasked with infiltration, the other with creating diversions. Their target, the secure facility where the American spy was being tortured for the drive's whereabouts. While surveillance drones disguised as balloon cameras hovered above, tracking every movement, the breach team planted a timed charge on the compound's outer wall. The blast tore through concrete and steel. In the chaos, Delta stormed in, guns blazing, suppressing CCTV feeds and jamming all signals. Guards fell, alarms were silenced, and in the belly of the compound, they found the spy barely alive after enduring relentless waterboarding. With seconds to spare, they escaped, hijacking a tourist's Jeep Wrangler amid the panic. Civilians scattered. Sirens wailed in the distance. Russian forces mobilized, but they were too late. The team raced toward the extraction point on a remote beach where a chopper was waiting, blades already spinning. They lifted off into the cold Russian air, leaving behind smoke, bodies, and fury. The Russian authorities mourned their losses and vowed revenge. But for the Delta Force, it was another job done with zero casualties on their end. Back on U.S. soil, the stolen intelligence was dissected by forensic analysts. The threat had been neutralized, or so they thought. Years later, tragedy struck. 3 members of the Delta Force were reported dead along with their families. The incidents were staged to appear as freak accidents, but the surviving 7 knew better: they were being hunted. Before any could reach their loved ones, more horrifying news came. Their families, wives, children were found murdered in cold blood. All signs pointed to one harrowing conclusion: someone had leaked their identities. But how? They had operated in shadows. No names. No records. Not even their children knew what they did. The betrayal ran deeper. A Russian operative, a femme fatale named Romanov, had seduced the official. Posing as a college student, his well-known weakness, she drugged him, accessed his penthouse systems, and used his fingerprint and retinal scan to enter the secure database. There, she unearthed the entire Delta Force mission log and their personal data. The truth shattered them. Men who had dedicated their lives to a flag now faced the unthinkable: their country had failed them. And in that moment, something shifted. Vengeance took root where loyalty once stood. The Delta Force disappeared from the grid. Now ghosts, they began to move differently, not as soldiers of the state, but as terrorists. The same nation they had sworn to defend had become the one they attack. They were once America's most elite. Now, they're its most dangerous enemies. The rogue unit, once known as Delta Force, had gone dark, reshaped by betrayal, loss, and abandonment. Their mission wasn't for country anymore, it was for vengeance. With nothing left to lose, they demanded reparations: $1 billion in exchange for the lives they sacrificed and the loved ones they'd lost. Their plan was simple and brutal: abduct high-ranking officials, demand ransom. But the Pentagon refused to budge. The United States will not negotiate with terrorists. So the team executed the captives one by one, upping the stakes. If diplomacy failed, leverage would speak louder. That's when someone mentioned the unthinkable: the nuclear codes. With precision born of elite training and cold experience, they infiltrated every layer of defense and captured the uncatchable General Duke Phillips, head of the Pentagon. Dragged into an underground black site, Duke faced relentless torture. But he wouldn't break. He was old, yes. But he was a fighter. Then, they checked Duke's files and saw he had a single relative within the country, his daughter Sarah Phillips. A med student in California. She became the new pawn in their game. As the terrorists mobilized to capture Sarah, they missed one detail. Tucked beneath Duke's sleeve was an old military-grade wristwatch. It transmitted a signal to an old colleague now retired. The signal was a code red and only him could decode the meaning. When decoded it means the transporter. The signal reached a retired U.S. Marshal living off-grid. It was time to call out his best asset, an outcast living off-grid known only as Transporter X. He knew the names behind the masks. These weren't just rogue soldiers, they were the ghost unit he'd trained. And he knew the only man who could stop them wasn't in uniform anymore. An exile. Not for failure, but for insubordination. Too wild to control. Too lethal to ignore. Once part of a Black Ops unit even darker than Delta Force, Ethan now lived far away on a remote Cape Verde island, Africa. He built shelters. Brought power to villages. Protected locals from billion-dollar corporate invaders. The call reached him through a solemn woman who taught children in the village. She held the satellite phone like a goodbye. He earlier climbed a makeshift tower to finish wiring electricity for the village. Bullets rained from corporate company security's guns trying to take him out. He leapt into the ocean below. When he reached the shore, dripping wet, he answered. The voice of his old commander spoke, "Ethan, the nuclear codes are in play. Your mission, retrieve the girl. Protect the nuclear codes." He didn't want to leave, but the woman's eyes said it all. They needed him again. It was time to go off and save the world. Los Angeles. 4 o'clock hours. Sarah Phillips's day started like any other. Classes, coffee, lunch with friends. Then came the men with AR-15s. Shots rang out. Screams filled the campus. Bodies fell. Sarah ran. She didn't know she was the target. Not until a bullet ripped through the skull of the man reaching for her, and a silent, rugged man grabbed her, tossed her over his shoulder, and disappeared into a black bulletproof BMW sedan. She screamed. Fought. Demanded answers. Ethan said nothing. He just drove. The terrorists gave chase. Inside the car, chaos. Outside, high-speed pursuit. Sarah didn't know him. Didn't know why he'd taken her. Didn't know her life was tied to codes that could end the world. And Ethan, dead-eyed, determined, was the only thing standing between her and oblivion. Sarah was in panic mode, screaming, flailing, pounding on the bulletproof glass. She couldn't process what was happening. Armed men. A kidnapping. A strange man driving like a ghost through gunfire and chaos. On the freeway, the black BMW weaved through traffic like a ghost, bullets pinging off its armored shell. Ethan didn't flinch. One hand on the wheel, the other near a concealed sidearm. In the passenger seat, Sarah Phillips was chaos incarnate. Crying, yelling, punching the dashboard. Who are you? What the hell is going on? Ethan's eyes stayed locked on the road. Seatbelt. What? Put it on. She clicked it just before the car swerved into an underpass, tires screeching as Ethan whipped a hard turn, losing 2 of the SUVs chasing them. Another pickup truck followed, armed men leaning out the windows, unloading rounds. Ethan tapped a switch. A smoke screen hissed from the rear bumper, blinding their attackers. Moments later, the BMW burst through a narrow alley and vanished into the maze of the inner city. Silence. Sarah breathed hard, disoriented. Her hands trembled as she stared at Ethan. You killed someone back there. You kidnapped me. I saved your life, he said flatly. From who? Ethan pulled into an abandoned parking structure and parked beneath a flickering overhead light. He finally looked at her. His eyes were steel, but not without weight. For the first time since it began, Ethan spoke. Be quiet. I'm trying to focus. His voice was cold. Flat. Absolute. As Sarah fought to make sense of it all, Ethan did what he was trained to do: neutralize threats. He eliminated the remaining pursuers, skillfully outmaneuvered police cruisers now tailing them, and vanished down the sun-scorched highways of California's Mojave Desert. There was no handing her over to the police. The precinct would fall in minutes if the Delta team knew where she was. Ethan knew it. He was her only shot at survival. Inside the car, Sarah watched in stunned silence as Ethan reached over and snatched her phone. Then her smartwatch. Her tablet. Every digital tether to the world smashed without a word. She gasped, outraged. What the hell is your problem? But Ethan wasn't listening. He tapped into the vehicle's secure console. On screen, breaking news. Surveillance footage of her being dragged into the BMW sedan. The headline, medical student abducted by armed fugitive, public warned to stay alert. Her face was everywhere, all over the news, Twitter, Instagram, everything that had a screen. In Spain, her mother, a Spanish national and former military attaché, saw the news. She didn't panic. She knew this wasn't a kidnapping. This was protection. She recognized the pattern, the Black Ops precision. Someone from her husband's world had been activated. Back on the road, Ethan was already changing direction. Their location had been compromised. Sarah had tried to send a message from a burner phone she'd hidden in her bag, one final call to the police. That signal was all the enemy needed. Mercenaries were already en route. Ethan didn't scold her. He just kept driving. Faster. This mission wasn't over. His orders were clear: get Sarah to a private military airstrip. From there, a secure aircraft would fly her to Spain. Somewhere beyond reach. Because she was the last pawn in a deadly game. The only thing standing between the rogue Delta unit and their billion-dollar escape. Duke Phillips was bloodied, bound, and still defiant. They pressed him again. Who's protecting your daughter? He chuckled through a broken lip. You're all dead already. The former Delta leader stared at him. Duke leaned forward. Before your little team was formed, there was another. A unit the Pentagon buried because they couldn't control it. And its leader? He's back. A silence fell over the room. He doesn't follow orders? He ends wars. Sudden impact. The BMW was hit. Tires screeched. Metal screamed. The car spun off-road and crashed hard. Sarah was the first to move. Dazed but alive, she forced open the passenger door and bolted into the open desert. Behind her, Ethan stumbled out of the wreck, twin silenced pistols in hand. But they weren't alone. They were surrounded. Mercenaries, drawn by the $1.5 million bounty, encircled them. Guns raised. Fingers twitching on triggers. And then the gunfire began. Ethan moved like a phantom. He shielded Sarah with his own body, taking bullets meant for her. He fought up close, ruthless, precise, dropping them one after another. When the dust cleared, Ethan was bleeding badly, barely standing. He threw Sarah back into the wrecked car and drove, one hand on the wheel, the other pressing a wound that wouldn't stop leaking. The car rolled into an empty lot and came to a stop. Ethan passed out behind the wheel. Sarah stumbled out, heart racing, legs weak. She started to run but stopped. Something in her froze. This man had taken bullets for her. Killed for her. Protected her. Why? She turned back. Ethan was convulsing in the seat, going into shock. He was dying. Without hesitation, Sarah dashed to the nearest pharmacy. She stormed the aisles, grabbing supplies, adrenaline, blood clot kits, painkillers, then ran out, alarms blaring behind her. She reached the car in time, dragged Ethan into the back seat, and worked fast, her medical instincts kicking in, steady hands moving like she was back in a trauma lab. She whispered to herself as she worked, "Don't die on me now, not after everything." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Inside the car, the war was far from over. Hours had passed since the bloodbath. The desert wind held outside the silent car, broken only by the slow hum of the engine cooling. Ethan stirred. Eyes cracked open to blurred daylight. His body ached, and his muscles burned, but the bleeding had stopped. Bandages wrapped tight around his wounds, gauze-stained but clean. As he tried to sit up, he noticed something else: Sarah, curled beside him in the back seat, fast asleep. She had stayed. He stared, stunned. She had saved him. As he shifted, she stirred and slowly opened her eyes. "You're awake," she whispered, eyes searching his. Ethan nodded. "You stopped the bleeding." She smiled faintly. "You saved me first." They sat in silence a moment. Then Ethan exhaled and finally offered what she deserved, the truth. "I am Ethan Crow, your transporter. I wouldn't be here either, if it weren't for you." He paused, measuring every word. "Your father has been abducted. The news never made it to the media, the government buried it. They didn't want panic." "Why would anyone take him?" she asked, voice trembling. "Because he has the nuclear launch codes." Ethan's voice dropped. "They want to sell them, or leverage them. And your life? Your life is the only thing keeping him from breaking." Sarah's breath caught. The truth shattered her world like glass. She wept quietly, unable to imagine what her father had endured. Ethan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "They won't kill him. He's too valuable. As long as you live, they can't get what they want." He explained the plan. At dawn, he'd get her to a black site airstrip. A jet would be waiting to take her to Spain, where her mother had gone into protective custody. There, she'd be safe beyond the terrorists' reach. Sarah looked at Ethan. But not just with gratitude. In his eyes, she saw a storm. Rage held back by discipline. Pain hidden beneath precision. And somehow, peace. A strange, tragic peace. She leaned in and kissed him. He froze, stunned. "That's for saving my life," she said. And then she kissed him again. Deeper. Longer. He tried to resist, tried to hold on to the mission, to control, but Sarah melted the wall. The fear, the adrenaline, the connection, it all collided. Their bodies gave in to the moment. Ethan woke up and didn't see her. She went out to buy coffee but was captured. Ethan then drove to a safe house with gadgets. Ethan stripped off his torn clothes and stood under a cold shower, steam rising around scars from another life. Then he dressed in black, locked and loaded every piece of gear into a duffel, holstered pistols to his sides, and slid on Meta Ray-Ban shades. The Reaper was reborn. The McLaren sports car was always his choice. Sarah, now bound and beaten, sat inside a concrete stronghold surrounded by mercenaries and female thugs who took pleasure in her pain. Tears stained her cheeks. She whispered a name: Ethan. He had to come. He would come. He was already there. A micro-tracker, hidden in a strand of her hair, had done its job. Outside, Ethan approached the gate. Calm. Unshaken. What's your business here? A guard barked. The girl. Recognition turned to horror. He was the ghost. The agent. The man they couldn't catch. Gunfire erupted. Ethan responded with lead and steel. His bullets thundered through walls. Mercs collapsed before they could scream. He moved like a force of nature, slicing through flesh and armor with twin blades and bone-shattering speed. Sarah heard the gunfire and wept with relief. Ethan breached the room she was held in. She saw him and ran. Jumped into his arms. No words. Jew. They had seconds. He tossed her out the window, landing her near the McLaren Roadster. She jumped in. But Ethan didn't follow. Not yet. 3 ex-Delta Force soldiers blocked his path. Former brothers in arms. Now ghosts in his crosshairs. He spoke first. Come. I was the first they trained. I showed you the way. But this? This isn't the way back. It's a road to hell. They drew. Ethan moved. In a blur of motion, he drove a blade into one man's chest, spun, and shattered the skull of the second with a kick. The third didn't even raise his weapon before Ethan silenced him with a headshot. 3 bodies dropped before his sweat hit the ground. Then he took Sarah and drove as fast as the McLaren engine could perform to the private airstrip where the jet was waiting for her. Sarah did not want to leave his side. Under 48 hours they've known each other. Ethan already had a pull on her. He looked at her and smiled. He understood. She leaned in and kissed him, but Ethan only stared cold-hearted. She came down from the car wrapped in blanket and reluctantly went on the jet. Right before it took off, while eye contact was still maintained, he put the car in reverse and smashed the throttle, and as he almost got to the gate, flipped the car around, shifted the gear to drive in a blink of an eye, and drove off. In his defense, he had promised Sarah he would get her father back. Now it was time. Using a phone taken from the fallen Delta agent, Ethan traced their main stronghold, an old base he had once trained in. Now, it was their last mistake. Inside were 35 armed men and the final Delta members. Ethan's McLaren crashed through the gate. A blur of shadow entered through the ventilation system. By the time they noticed, he was in the center of them. The slaughter began. Limbs flew. Bullets sang. Screams echoed. No mercy. No hesitation. From the shadows, Duke Phillips heard the carnage and laughed through bloodied lips. You're all finished, he coughed. The last man held a gun to Duke's. He dropped the weapon, he barked. Ethan did. But as the enemy looked at the falling gun, Ethan's hand moved. A blade flicked through the air, embedding deep into the man's left eye. Silence followed. Then collapse. Ethan cut Duke free. The general looked at him, broken, but smiling. Thank you, he said. They stepped into daylight. A military chopper descended after he made the call. Duke was airlifted to safety. While Ethan vanished in the dust of the McLaren's tires, only the sound of gear change was heard from above. Pentagon was saved as well as the world. The threat neutralized. The nuclear code safe. The world would never know what had happened, or who had saved it. In Spain, Sarah sat with her mother in a quiet villa. The door opened. Her father stood there, alive. Tears flooded the room. A family, whole again. But Sarah, she lingered by the door. Eyes distant, and she smiled and waved. Her mother followed her gaze and asked, "Who are you waving at?" Sarah smiled faintly. No one. They both went inside. On a rooftop, far beyond visible range miles out, a man in black sat still, sniper scope focused on the house. Watching. Guarding. Ethan Crow, Transporter X. The world would never know his name. But peace would remember his silence. For more stories like this, please like and subscribe to our channel.